Hello and welcome to the Shack News Chattycast, the podcast that I'm your host, Steve Watts.
Well
I'm your other
done.
I'm your other host, Brian Carr. Steve, today's Chattycast brought to you by Audible.com. As always, get a free audiobook download and a free 30-day trial. That's it at www.audibletrial.com/chattycast. So thanks, Audible.
Today's guest is the Shoryuken to my Tiger Uppercut, Ozzy Mejia.
The production values on this show just don't cease to amaze me.
I
It's
know,
incredible.
yeah, we're getting all high tech now. um,
You win.
so,
Oh God.
So we're just gonna be doing this the whole time, right? Like
Yep.
this is what we've become.
this is how it works. Today's topic, obviously, is Street Fighter. Street Fighter 5 is launching this week. I'm playing sounds from Street Fighter 2. But Street Fighter 5 launched this week, so we're going to be talking about Street Fighter in general, the series as a whole, sort of a retrospective, and also, of course, getting into a good bit of Street Fighter 5 talk, because I know both of you have been playing it. But before we get to all that, let's talk about a few games that are not Street Fighter.
Huh? What are those?
with with what have you been playing? And Ozzy, I know that since you were on a review of Street Fighter, that's probably, and also since you love Street Fighter, that's probably a lot of what you've been playing. Have you been playing anything else?
That's been pretty much the bulk of what I've been playing. I've been trying to jump in here and there to a couple of other things, whether it's the Overwatch beta, which is still like it's life after Team Fortress for me. And I don't say that lightly because I've gotten a couple of like side eyes from Chatty who are going like, really? And I go, but Team Fortress was my firstborn. I played that game for like 10 years, and even I know that it's time to say goodbye. And we are, for the record, Chatty is going to have a Team Fortress game running on Thursday. I'll probably jump in on that because I can never say no to that sort of thing.
Because you have,
But
yeah.
but I recognize that Overwatch has become basically, it feels like the old vanilla Team Fortress days, and I can't help but just really appreciate that. So it's good to get into that sort of thing again. And of course, I've been running through some of the Mario Maker event levels that I haven't had a chance to catch up with. They had a 4-pack of levels from like a kind of a, I think some level making competition that they did in Japan. Really creative stuff. Although I hit a wall with that water level because I have no idea what it's supposed to do. It's basically a giant wall, a bunch of bullets, and 2 doors that just loop into one another. And I have no idea what to do with any of that.
People are making some complex puzzles in those things. Yeah, every time I think about going back to Mario Maker, I see some GIF of like somebody. There was one just on Reddit yesterday that was like a bunch of Beetle Baileys just bouncing off of them
Fuzzy
in very
beetles.
specific ways. Fuzzy Beetles, yeah. Beetle Baileys.
That's a
Bouncing off
different
of them
thing.
in very specific ways, like perfectly timed, and I was like, that doesn't look fun.
But the event levels are actually really clever, and
Mhm.
the Pokemon one that they added last week is actually really, really cool in that they actually have multiple paths. Like there's 3 different paths depending on which quote-unquote Pokemon you choose. You be a Charmander, you go through like a fire part of the stage. You go through you're a Squirtle, you see a bunch of water. You see a Bulbasaur, you see a bunch of vines. It's really cool stuff. It's actually kind of clever. I kind of like what Nintendo's doing with a lot of those events, and I wish they'd come more frequently because they're some of the more creative elements that I've seen in that game.
They really are. Like that was just a fantastic little stage, and I just love how they implemented the sort of core mechanic or the idea of choosing Pokemon into it. Like you said, just fantastic, and even had the sound effects, which is even better.
I'm looking forward to see what they do with Fire Emblem.
That's got to have something, right?
Yeah, they're gonna do something with Fire Emblem, and that's gonna be pretty fun to see what they come up with.
They'll make it a full-on strategy RPG in in Mario Maker.
See, you laugh, but we've seen them do like different
People made
things with Mario Maker
calculators.
that we never thought was possible.
Yeah.
So who knows at this point?
Yeah, it's surprising the amount of flexibility people have figured out in that thing.
It's crazy. We're still probably scratching the surface of it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Brian, have
Yeah.
you been playing things other than Street Fighter?
Not a whole lot. I got back into The Witcher for like an hour and a half, and I was fighting some monsters, and my sword started to deteriorate, and it's like you need to go find a blacksmith. So I looked on the map. I could not find a blacksmith. I don't know how to get to one. I don't remember where the towns are because it's been like a month and a half since I played it. So I don't know what to do here, and I'm not entirely sure I want to find out.
The Witcher is a difficult game to play in bursts like that. I have
Yeah,
to say.
so and that's unfortunately kind of the only way I can play. So we'll see how my relationship with that progresses. I also played. I'm still trying to make an earnest effort towards my 4 in February stuff. I played some Shantae. I've been playing that. That game gets like really good as it opens up and you get more of the abilities, and it doesn't like it does something, or it handles itself, I think, better than a lot of Metroidvania games do, because the puzzles are not impossible to figure out. You have some direction, and it's not quite, you have one giant labyrinth you're navigating. There are different areas, different places you can go back to, and sometimes it's pretty clear. Like if there's a part in the game where you are stuck, if you read the context clues and you look at like your your descriptions of things, you can usually figure out what you have to do. And I think that's just really good, solid design, and it's cute and it's fun. So I'm hoping I can wrap that up before. Well, it's not going to get finished before Fire Emblem, but I would like to make an honest effort to do so.
I'm waiting for Half Genie Hero to come out, and that's the one that I tried at Indiecade, which is the cel-shaded one. It's basically done with the DuckTales remastered art style, which it looks gorgeous. It looks really good. It doesn't have that pixely art anymore. That was kind of, charmingly retro, but at the same time, it's like, it doesn't age well. That look doesn't age well.
Right.
This one looks really tremendous, and I'm looking forward to getting a little more of it than I did back in October.
I'm always a big fan of WayForward stuff for that reason. They put a ton of personality into what they do, the animations and all that, just a lot of effort into it, regardless of whether they are, polygonal cell shaded or, pixel art. So I'm really curious to see what they'll do with a little bit bigger budget and a little bit bigger scope.
I've been a fan since Contra 4, so
yeah.
they always have my sword.
And my axe.
I want to give a shout out real quick to their Batman Brave and the Bold game, because
that was so good.
I heard
that was
really
fantastic, good. And just the last level of the game is so funny, and like you could tell that it was just people who have a sense of humor made this. So I was really excited for it.
It was made by people who understood why the show is funny.
Exactly.
I tried that at E3. That's a very underappreciated game.
It is. It really is.
Yeah, it was good. All right. I've been playing some Fire Emblem. You mentioned Fire Emblem. I've been playing Fire Emblem. The review embargo just went up like an hour ago. So now I'm free to talk about it. It's real good, you guys. Like I I loved it. I've talked a little bit about it on previous shows, and it's kind of hard to talk about what's new and different about it because it is very similar to Awakening, but Awakening was also real good. But Awakening lost me a little bit with the story. They had like the whole time travel aspect with your kids. You got to do something about your kids.
Marty.
Yeah. Like they tied that as a major plot element in Awakening, and this one has the whole, you can get married and have kids, and your kids are sort of generated based on. There's I think like maybe 6 or 8 choices, something like that, based on who you marry. It determines which kids you have and how many kids you have. So there's still all that stuff, but it's not like a major plot element. Like your child is not like the thing that the story hinges around. It's just an extra character.
So there's no Lucina this time around.
There's no Lucina or anything like that.
You picked a fine time to leave us.
I had in both games I had 2 kids because in both games I hooked up with Jacob. I'm playing as a girl. So in both versions, I had 2 kids named Dwyer and Kana, I think, and both of them were like fairly useless by the time I got them, so I didn't really use them. So like that's a thing, but that's not the thing that the plot hinges around, which I always thought was like kind of silly and weird that they had like this magical time travel element in a Fire Emblem game. Instead, it's more about this choice that you're presented with, which depending on which version you buy, isn't presented as a choice. It's just presented as how the plot goes. I covered this a little bit in my review. Basically, the first 5 chapters are the setup, where you are this daughter of a corrupt king. You're sent out on a mission. While in the course of that mission, you find out you're actually royalty from the other kingdom, their rival kingdom, and you were kidnapped as a child. Um, that sort of leads these tensions between the two kingdoms to boil over, and they start fighting over you, basically. And then they sort of present you with the, oh, right, well, which one of us are you going to side with choice? And your birth family, the Hoshido, is the birthright choice. Your adoptive family of Nor is called the conquest choice. And those are the two sort of main versions of the game. And then there's a third sort of, I would say epilogue, but it's like the length of a full game. But you're choosing neither of those, and it's called Revelation. So it really more hinges on that choice, and whichever side you choose, you're sort of watching the fallout of what happens when you do that. Go ahead.
I'm kind of curious, so choice 1, go with this family. Choice 2, go with your birth family. I'm curious what choice 3 is. Like, you just going to go off and start your own.
Choice 3. This isn't really a spoiler because it's actually, if you get the special edition, you can. It lays out this choice, and you can actually do Revelation first. But they're just like, don't do that because it's not it's not going to make any sense, and you're not going to get any of like the punch or impact of this being the compromise. Choice if you do it first, but you can choose it right away, and the choice is refuse to fight for either side.
Okay.
That's how it's presented. And when you choose that, basically you're like, no, you're basically like trying to act conciliatory to both groups, and you end up fighting both groups because that pisses both of them off. Yeah. And yes, that pisses both of them off to some extent. So you're sort of like recruiting bits and pieces of both armies in that one.
Gotcha.
And really, the main driving force, no matter which side you choose, the main driving force is stopping your evil father, who I think I stated in a previous episode. Like, as soon as you see him, you're like, that guy is evil. like, there's no, they do not pick bones about it. Like, he is like. He looks evil. The first thing he asks you to do is to kill unarmed prisoners.
He's got little horns and a goatee, and he eats kittens.
Very clearly,
he's played by Christopher Walken.
Yeah. So in both versions, you're sort of trying to stop him. In the Birthright version, you're trying to conquer him because you're the rival kingdom. You're trying to overthrow his kingdom. In the Conquest version, you're sort of working from within, and it's a little more nuanced. I think I actually like the Conquest story a little better because there's a lot more. He's telling you to go do things, and you're going out to do them and technically fulfilling the mission, but in a way that he didn't intend. Like, he's like, go kill all of these people because we want to do this. And you'll go there and you won't kill anybody because you're trying to be a peacemaker, but you'll come back and be like, well, we accomplished our goal, and I did it in a different way, so you can't be mad at me, So you're sort of like subverting his wishes in the Conquest version.
We have a guide up on Shack News talking about the differences between the three games, and I'll confess that I've read that a couple times because even I need to know this just what exactly are the differences between these three games?
Yeah. I mean, the other really big difference is the difficulty. Conquest is like significantly, seriously way harder. Like, you're not going to be breezing through it. I sort of breezed through Birthright for the most part. Conquest is much more of a challenge. So the recommended order that we have on Shack News, if you're going to play all three, is Birthright, then Conquest, then Revelation, because that way you get the good difficulty ramp as well as the story told in the correct way. So yeah, Conquest, like I said, you're subverting Hoshido, you're trying to defeat him, but in both versions they sort of hint that there's a little more going on with him than you might suspect. I think I'm allowed to talk about this because I'm not allowed to talk about anything past certain chapters. But there's an earlier chapter, around chapter 16 or so, where one of the main characters, the blue-haired girl that you see in the center of all the artwork, sort of indicates that like she recognizes that there's something off, So without going into detail, there is definitely something off about that guy, and I suspect and assume that by the end of Revelation, which I haven't completed yet, that you'll resolve that situation. I think that's sort of the gist, is that in neither of them you actually resolve that, and then in Revelation you do. But the point that I sort of made in my review is that like seeing the fallout of these choices is really what makes it interesting. Like when you choose Hoshido, your father in the Nor kingdom is obviously evil. But you've got these four siblings. You've got four siblings on either side. But you've got these four siblings on the North side who like genuinely seem like good people and they genuinely care about you. And like almost to the point that it's like, okay, you care about me a little too much, because like every time you see my character, all you talk about is like loving me.
Stop making it so hard to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to battle them, and there's different sacrifices that take place. I won't go into detail about them, but basically, like that family kind of rips itself apart in some pretty ugly ways. It goes to some pretty dark places. So like you're seeing that fallout on one side, and then you're seeing kind of the opposite fallout on the other side of all these horrible things happening. And the sort of thesis statement seems to be like being the mediator, being the peaceful person is the correct path, because that's the way that you save everyone. Which is sort of an interesting little thesis for a game that is essentially about war.
Right.
But yeah, I liked it a lot. And of course, surrounding that story that I've been talking about a lot is the classic. It's Fire Emblem, and Fire Emblem is a really good strategy game. They've expanded the weapon wheel. It used to be sort of like a rock paper scissors. Now it's like rock paper scissors shoe. Like there's like 8
Shoe?
there's like 8 things, but they've color
Good
coded
old
it.
shoe. Nothing beats that.
But they've color coded it, so like, okay, green things always beat. It's like the Pokemon basically triangle. You can say like, okay, well, blue things always beat red, green things always beat blue. So like axes will fit into one color, and so you don't have to actually memorize every single weapon versus every single other weapon. You just say like, okay, this is a green weapon, that's a blue weapon, I'm good. So that's like, it's like little tweaks like that make smart improvements, but for the most part, it's very similar to Awakening gameplay wise. That's what I've been up to a lot, because that's like 3 fairly long games.
But we had the question last week, I think, of is this too much Fire Emblem?
Yes, I should address that. I was afraid it would be too much Fire Emblem, and I guess depending on how fast you might grow sick of it, it might be for some people. But for me, it wasn't. I was afraid it was going to be, but for me, the variety of the story and sort of seeing these different angles on the story, plus the variety of gameplay, it's not as if there are some repeated environments here and there, but it's not as if Conquest and Birthright are just mirror images, and you're just like on the same battlefield fighting different people. For the most part, it's different battlefields, different environments, as well as different objectives. In Birthright, we mentioned this in our differences guide. Birthright, the objectives tend to be fairly simplistic and straightforward. It's like beat this boss, or there's a bunch of enemies here, beat all of them. Like that's almost every mission in Birthright. In Conquest, there's more complex objectives, like, hey, one of these neutral units, there's like green units that are neutral. It's like one of these neutral units is actually an enemy spy. So go around and talk to each of them and figure out which one it is, and then once you figure out which one it is, he turns into a boss character and you have to fight him.
Nice.
So like that's like an example of the one that I just did not that long ago was like after each turn, there's these wind gusts that will push you 5 spaces in the direction that it's blowing. So you need to plan where your character ends up, because they're going to be moved 5 spaces at the end of the turn. So Conquest has a lot more like little wrinkles like that, and that added a lot of extra variety that sort of kept it from feeling like you were just kind of doing the same thing twice. The only area that I did kind of feel like you were doing the same thing twice was building your castle and building your relationships, which sort of take place in the same hub area. So I would just be like talking to like I said, I married Jacob in both, because he seems to be like the easy one to marry. he already kind of is in love with you when the game starts. But like, I'm basically just like going through the same conversations, and I'm like speeding through them. Like, okay, yeah, I know, yeah. Like, you teach my character how to make tea. I get it. So like things like that do actually repeat a little bit. But other than that, it was really two very different experiences. So
all right,
yeah. So with that said, let's talk about the actual thing that you guys have been spending a lot of time on, Street Fighter V, and we'll use that to segue into talk about Street Fighter in general. But I want to just give you guys the opportunity, first and foremost, to just talk about Street Fighter V. So Ozzy, as a reviewer,
yes,
please lead the way here.
First of all, I can't really speak to what rank I am at the moment, because Capcom throughout the entire weekend, all the way through last night, have been resetting my online profile, which
Is that connected to the server issues that we've been hearing about, or is
I
that
haven't
like
seen any
a
server
separate problem?
uh, I know that apparently there were a lot of some server issues at launch. I actually, and this is where I feel awkward. I didn't run into those. Like, I was actually playing pretty smoothly throughout the entire week, throughout the weekend, and this is why I kind of decided to go with the score, because I know there are times that we wait for live servers to kind of go forward. I I saw so many so many vendors were breaking street date and just like
That it was
kind of doling.
basically just out.
Oh yeah, even like a lot of my Facebook and Twitter friends were like posting like hey, I got my copy of the game on Friday, because we have local retailers that decide to just kind of just hand them out.
Yeah.
So I figured, I'm like, okay, if this is the case everywhere, there's going to be people with the game. There's going to be enough people out there. I could probably get a good taste of what a live online environment is, and I didn't see any issues. And I actually didn't really see any issues on launch night either. So that was so I don't
That's
know.
surprising, but good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's especially good for me because I have really, not great charter internet. I have I stopped short of saying crappy. But no,
This is gonna keep happening.
online was very smooth for me. I didn't have any major issues other than, just the online interface itself, which is kind of a bummer. Where it's like, oh, I had this really close match. I came within this close of beating this one person. I'm like, okay, where can I hit the rematch button? There is no rematch button. Why is there not a rematch button?
That seems like a pretty basic thing.
A baffling omission.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very upset by that, and I think that's
kind of
something that
like one of the points that I think we have to touch on is the content offerings of this initial release. That's been the thing.
I was easing into that, but
yeah. I'm pushing you in forcefully.
Well, I guess before we segue into that, we have to talk about the reasoning behind that, and that's of course, the Capcom Pro Tour is coming up. Capcom doesn't want to waste any time. They want to jump right into the competitive aspect. I believe Final Round is this weekend, so they're going to start. It's either this weekend or it's in March. I don't know, but but they want to jump in right away, hit the ground running, and just start with the competitive element of Street Fighter, start that entire season. So they wanted to get something out in the stores. Unfortunately, what you have is not a lot. It's basically your story mode, which is maybe 5-10 minutes apiece. It's barely a blip. They're all like one round apiece, and the AI is pitifully easy. You got your survival mode, which is also one round, and at least the AI varies there. You can pick between easy, medium, hard, and hell, which, of course, hell is hell. But yeah, there's no real traditional versus CPU mode. There's no real chance to kind of get your feet wet in that aspect. There's a training mode where you can kind of like set the AI to do like certain things, set the AI at certain difficulties. You can try that at least, but there's not a lot there. And of course, online is basically just your casual and your ranked match, and you can kind of go like go into and search for them, but you can't. There's no lobbies. Like there aren't any lobbies for at least another couple weeks. So at this point, you just gotta just kind of hope for a random match. But what I do like is that you can set the search in the background. You can actually go into the options, go to your battle settings, and go, hey, you're going to go play single player. So we can go looking for a ranked or a casual match in the background while you play. And then once you get done with your game, we'll just throw you back in. So that's a really cool element.
I think they've
your single player match while you go play a multiplayer match, or is it just like you start over basically?
If you're like in the middle of a single player match, it'll basically start you from the start of that match. So it won't interrupt you too much. Like if you're on the verge of winning this like the 99th match in hell mode, you're kind of gonna be like, oh, gee.
Yeah, that sounds annoying.
But the thing is, you can also set it to ask you if you want to accept. So you can actually turn it down. If you're like, okay, I'm at a pivotal moment. I don't want to jump into multiplayer right now, so I'm gonna say no to this and just keep going. So that option's there too.
All right. That's good.
And that's a really smart feature. I think they've had it in for at least since 4. I know it was in
I kind of remember
Cross Tekken too.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and I remember it didn't operate exactly in that fashion in the beta. I think the beta would actually just throw you into training until you found a match. So this is actually kind of a nicer change.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask both of you a question as people who have played this. How do you feel it introduces new players? You said there's no real tutorial mode. There's sort of a training mode that you can kind of play around. From what I've heard some feedback that there are new systems that it doesn't really explain. So how do you get yourself used to those? Does it make any effort to to ease in new players to some of those systems?
It's funny because a lot of these systems are very easy for new players to get a hang of. Like the V system is much easier than the ultra combos that they were using in 4. Like
Hmm.
it's just a matter of just like hitting a couple of buttons, getting used to what each character does. Each character has a different V trigger or a V reversal or anything like that. So just getting kind of used to what they do is easy. But they don't actually. But you're right. They don't actually explain what they are. You
I
kind
mean,
of
do they
just.
explain like, yeah, what they are is really what I was asking. But like, do they explain like why you would want to use one of those and when, and like what the purpose of it is? I guess
They give you a
Kinda.
very bare bones tutorial at the start of the game. I can
Well,
tell you
and
that
the,
much.
that's
and the thing that's frustrating with like I can't remember what the move is called, but there's one that's like very situational, right? And it's triangle and circle together, and depending on the character, it's supposed to do different things. They don't bother explaining it beyond that. So if I wanted to look up what it does for Armika, I have no idea. I know what it does for Ryu, but they don't tell you anybody else's.
Yeah,
you need to like actually try it out in. Is that
Yeah,
something you would try out in training mode? Like just wait till you build it up and try it out to see.
I think it
kinda.
takes for granted that you're going to be playing with your friends and
Yeah.
you're just going to be experimenting as you go. So it probably just kind of takes that whole thing and kind
It
of
almost
expects that
sounds
of people.
like this is just my observation as an outsider, but it almost sounds like this was designed for the pro scene or
Yeah.
for people who are going to be playing it like an arcade game. You know
hmm
what I mean? People who are going to be in a certain culture where they talk about this stuff instead of just kind of playing themselves.
I really do feel that rationale was what went into just getting this out there so early. Is because I really do feel like they are catering more to the pro crowd because they're
Yeah,
just like,
yeah.
well, the pro crowd isn't going to
I
care about
mean,
all these extra features. They're just
the
going
the
to want.
spec the speculation I heard was like, oh, they needed it out for financials, but nobody's financials close in February. Like like they have this big they have this big patch coming in March, and it's like, well, if it was just a financial thing, they could have waited till March.
hmm
Which that would be before their fiscal year closes, because that's before every fiscal year closes. So I don't think that's really the answer. It sounds more like it's this pro scene
This
consideration.
was such a hard game to review, and I know that we don't grade to a number ourselves, and I don't know that we don't write to a score, and I know that we don't even assign the scores ourselves.
Hmm.
But this was very hard to this. It was hard to come up with like what score to possibly give this because so much is missing.
hmm
And when you compare it to other packages like Mortal Kombat or Killer Instinct or even something like Smash Brothers, those are feature complete games and they come with a lot of game modes and a lot of features and
Yeah.
still feel like good fighting games in themselves. So
Mortal Kombat X is debatable, but yeah, like
I mean, is
you're
this
right. Other than that,
this is sort of a larger conversation that I think could be its own topic on the show sometime. But like, is this an example of just gaming in the modern era where developers are treating games like live experiences and they know that they're going to be building them as they go?
yeah, it's everything early access at this point.
Yeah.
the
And
and
wasn't this kind of early. It had betas, I guess. That's not really early access. Um, it didn't have an early access or anything, did it?
No, no, no.
Yeah.
Although everything seems to have a multiplayer beta these days.
Yeah, beta. But I
what's
guess they were
interesting
actually testing the servers.
what's interesting is that I heard that Capcom's model, what they're patterning this off of, is League of Legends, and
That's weird.
it is weird. Like it explains a lot, but the
I mean, do they have a bunch of
mobification
characters and then like, hey, you can try out Armika this week for free?
like I would be very surprised.
That's Killer Instinct's model, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Killer Instinct's even closer, but yeah, like, and I don't know if that's the way I would go with it. But again, like, I don't know the financials. you see a lot of trend chasing in the industry sometimes, and I think a lot of people just say, "Oh man, League of Legends is huge. Let's just run our game the same way." Well, the character allocation and rolling out features isn't what made League of Legends popular, right? So I don't know. Like I don't know if they're just expecting the market to be different and people just be more accepting of this now. It's like Ozzy said, it's difficult, and I think that he was right on, and you're right on your review there, Ozzy. Like, this is good, and it could potentially be very good, but right now it's like, what do you do with it?
Yeah,
It
like
sounds like
I'm not reviewing Street Fighter 1.5 or Street Fighter 2.0. I'm reviewing the launch version, and the launch version is missing a lot of stuff.
it sounds like there was definitely a frustration, like a tone of frustration in your review of like this is such a great foundation, but there's so much missing. But it's like, yeah.
I wanted it to be good, and it is good. In a certain extent, it's really good. I'm enjoying it. I'm still playing it, but I can't put it ahead of other fighting games that have more features or that's like feature complete. Like that would be wrong.
Yeah.
So we've complained a lot about it. Can we spend just a couple minutes talking about like what stands out as like really good and pushing either the series or the genre forward for this game?
Okay. So I don't know if it's something that's going to be a revolutionary step forward for fighting games. That's not. I don't think that's really what they're trying to do here. I do think that they have executed very well on certain elements. The frame rate's real good. It looks really smooth and clean, and I like the new characters. The new characters are actually real good. I'm not really into Laura so much, but Rashid is awesome.
Rashid is
Everybody seems to love Rashid.
Rashid is a great character,
yeah.
and
he's so much fun. Go on.
Yeah, his moves are fun, and his personality is really interesting from the story mode. Like, he's just this guy who kind of travels around with his mentor and looks for fights on Twitter. That's awesome. Like, this is
so he's a modern Ryu.
Kind of, but
a little less.
He's millennial Ryu, pretty much.
I kind of feel like he actually has more than one change of clothes, though. So I wouldn't quite say that he's Ryu. He's probably he has a house.
And the funny thing is, I think for such a history, I mean, let's face it, Street Fighter has had kind of had this whole stereotype problem.
Mm-hmm.
Rashid's not a stereotype.
No,
he really isn't.
I was really afraid he would be, but there's nothing about his portrayal that's even close. He's just he is a guy who happens to be Middle Eastern, but he could be anybody. Like, and that's, I think, really, really refreshing. Like, this character is not defined by his ethnicity. It's just part of who he is.
That's
Which that's the most other Street Fighter characters. But
he's no E Honda.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing but love for E Honda, but yeah.
At some point.
I mean, is this here's a hard question. Is this as big a leap for Street Fighter as most Street Fighters tend to be? I think that was the concern when we saw the art style. It was like, wow, this looks a lot like Street Fighter 4. In terms of Street Fighter 4 was very different than 3, and 3 was very different than 2. They tend to have these giant leaps, and people were concerned that this wasn't going to be as big a leap.
I guess in terms of accessibility, it is just because people like me that are like scrub tier feel like they have a chance. Just because the pace is quick and the combo system's a lot easier. In fact, the combo system might be a little too easy. I mean, you can easily just go jab, like medium special move, like every time it'll get you through. But you can do that in Killer Instinct too. That doesn't make it great. Like, you still have to like read the character, read the opponent, and all that sort of thing in order to like really thrive. So it's a jump. I don't know if it's a huge jump from like 3 to 2.
Yeah, it changes some things that we've kind of taken for granted in Street Fighter. The biggest thing is I decided to fire up Chun-Li in the beta, and I was immediately struck by the fact I didn't know how to do any of her moves anymore. They really simplified and changed a lot of the move inputs.
You can't just pound on the kick button until she kicks real fast?
No, it's now. It's a quarter circle forward and kick. It's a fireball motion, and a lot of the moves are now fireball motions, which is surprising to me because, I mean, one, that makes it much more accessible, and I'm certainly not saying we need to go back to the days where you had chargers and all that sort of thing, because I hate charge characters.
Yeah.
And they still have some charge moves on Chun-Li, which I cannot pull off for the life of me.
And there are still a few charge characters in there.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure Guile or Nash is going to be pretty much the same thing.
No, Nash is not actually. Nash
not
is
a charge character
motion
anymore?
for Sonic Boom.
Oh, dang.
Guile will probably be charged when he gets into the game because
Yeah.
Guile's supposed to be in a couple of months.
I mean, the fireball quarter circle motion is like the classic.
Mhm.
That's the classic motion, right? I'm just wondering to sort of pick your brain on this. Do you think that's because in this effort to make it sort of pro scene, to sort of cater to the pro scene, obviously he's making it more welcoming for, as Ozzy put it, scrub tier. But when it comes to the pro scene, like they don't have difficulty pulling off the combo movements.
No.
For them, it's not really about the difficulty of doing the motion. It's the difficulty of choosing the time and situation to do the motion. So do you think that simplifying the actual exercise of pulling off the motion is sort of putting a greater emphasis on things like timing and judgment?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Timing is a big thing in these games, and timing is what separates the scrubs from the pros. Like it's knowing when to read certain situations, it's knowing how to respond to them, and
being able to consistently do a Shoryuken.
And being able to stay cool under pressure. Mm-hmm. Pressure is a big thing in these games, and trust me, when you get down and like you're down to like maybe a sliver of health compared to like a dude's entire bar, you get frustrated. It's easy to get frustrated in this game, but that's what makes you a scrub.
Yeah, it definitely feels like they reward offense a lot more in this one than they have in the past. Like a lot of the, and I don't know if that's just kind of like opening night stuff, but there's most people I played online play super aggressively, and they get rewarded for it because there's nothing I can do. That's actually one thing when you mentioned like how accessible this is to new players, I giggled because anybody who doesn't have some idea of how Street Fighter works is going to get murdered online right now. Like everybody on there is like in Evo training or something. You can't.
Well, it's preaching to the choir to some extent, right? Like at this point, Street Fighter 5.
Yeah, I mean it is, but
or Street Fighter like 45 if you're counting like all of the spin-offs.
At the same time, it's frustrating. Like it really is because I'll get a fight request saying, okay, here comes a new challenger. I'm like, great, I might as well not even show up. I'm just going to put the controller down, go like
I'm going to go
get the same result. Like there's nothing is going to be changed or improved by me physically pushing any buttons in this fight.
I felt that way with 4 constantly, but I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way as much with 5. I feel like with 5 I at least have a shot. I feel like I can at least get some hits in with 5.
I mean, do they have like a better I don't know, ranking or matching system so that you are matched against people that...
No.
Ideally you're supposed to win about 50% of your matches in any kind of matchmaking. Like, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, we don't... That's not quite ready yet.
Yeah, like, because I'm like, I alluded to the fact that Mortal Kombat X was kind of thin on features this compared to its predecessor, but one thing they got right was matchmaking. Like, they generally did a very good job of matching with people who are at least equivalent to you. So
I also had that spider lady.
Yeah.
So. Now the actual quality of the online match, that's a whole other thing. But...
Right. But I felt like, I could actually win maybe the majority of games I played on there, or at least come close. This, I'm just, there's like, and this has been a problem for me with a lot of Capcom fighters lately. Like, I know I'm not good, but I should at least be able to win once in a while.
So
I win once in a while. So I can't complain too much.
Sure. I want to move to
one day I hope to be like you, Ozzy.
I want to move to general Street Fighter memories.
Level 2 scrub.
If you guys have any quick wrap-up thoughts on Street Fighter 5, we can cover them before we move on to Street Fighter in general.
I will say this: the production values it is interesting where they put their focus on this game because it is not in the production values. Some of the voice acting is like all over the place. Like some of them are really good. Like Armika's got this weird like rasp. And Ozzy, you'll know what I'm talking about. I think it sounds a little bit like Stephanie McMahon. And,
oh God!
Like, and that to me was like
I don't hear that anymore.
It's just like
Street
a
Fighter
nice
references with wrestling
nice
references.
And then like I love Rashid's voice and all that. But then some of the other ones, like I don't know what's going on with Sakura. I don't know what's going on with Ryu. Like they're just made some questionable choices. And the art and the cutscenes and the still photos is either good or just what is happening.
Cringeworthy. We've seen some of the depictions of Laura. Like Laura is drawn terribly in some of those cutscenes.
I haven't seen Laura's yet. I'll have to boot that up next.
Oh jeez, like it's brutal. Yeah, but
I said multiple cutscenes if it's one match.
Yeah. I agree with the voice acting comment to an extent. Like a lot of the voice acting is actually really cringeworthy. What I'll do with some of the characters is I'll actually set them to Japanese.
Yeah.
Just because, like Bison to me should always be speaking Japanese because he sounds more threatening that way.
Yeah.
But there's
Ryu should be Japanese, probably. You know, like
Yeah.
if you are a character from Japan, it probably makes sense to just set that to their language.
But yeah, some of the voices are like kind of fit. Like Rashid's voice is fine, but
Yeah.
there are some others like Fong is still weird to me. Like he still sounds like James Hong. Like he still sounds like someone out of a kung fu film. Like I
Which-
don't.
I feel like that's probably a good direction to go in for him.
Yeah.
Because he has the look too, but
Although
That
while
makes me think they need to have like a use everyone's actual language option. Like
yeah.
Dalsim does not speak English.
No.
You know, like, all
I
the
feel
Japanese
like
characters
Marvel
speak
vs.
Japanese,
Capcom had that option
etc.
at one point.
I think they did, and I think I know other Street Fighter. I know Cross Tekken, I think, had it for sure. But like at the same time, I wouldn't want to give up Zangief's Russian accent. Like I'm a huge fan of like he's just like basically one step away from Moose and Squirrel, and I love it. Like he's just
You see what we're talking about with stereotypes? Like they don't. They had a lot of them in the back in the day.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, as
that
long as I
was Street Fighter
talking
2
about
to a T.
I thought he was
stereotypes.
interesting in that he's completely different from a lot of the other fighters because nobody's ever used poison before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and no one's ever actually had like a lingering effect, like a kind of
Yeah.
like an RPG status effect. Like that was weird.
And that's such a common trope in a lot of martial arts movies that you have the guy who's like the shady character who has like poison, fists or like a weapon on him that like will poison his enemy. So I'm really you're right. Like it is surprising they have not figured out a way to implement that yet. So
Yeah, like that was really cool to see. It actually reminded me a little bit of Persona in some ways. Like maybe we could have more status effects in these games in a Street Fighter game later on.
So let's move on to general Street Fighter memories. I want to read this one from a Musitron. He said, playing other people's at the arcade, there was always an
I
implied
think he's talking about the
rule.
little marshmallow chicks.
Yeah, playing peeps. You always win because they don't have arms.
You put them in the microwave after you're done. It's hilarious.
Playing other peeps at the arcade, there was always an implied rule that no one was allowed to play Dalsim because you could simply cheese your way to victory without even knowing what you were doing.
Mhm.
I don't remember Dalsim being ultra cheap in the home version when I was playing against my brother, but maybe I just, maybe we just weren't that good at it.
Dude can stretch across the screen. That's pretty.
Yeah,
that's pretty broken.
I mean but also his Yoga Flame I feel like was very like, oh, you're jumping towards me while you're screwed.
Yeah. But you did,
The Yoga Flame's still there. The fire's been adjusted to all the fire arcs now. Like that's strange to me. Like I gotta get used to that.
Yeah, that is weird. Arcing fireballs is not a usual thing for them. I know they've done it a couple times, but so favorite. I didn't ask the questions that I asked in my setup for the chatty, but favorite Street Fighter memories. Ozzy, as a longtime Street Fighter fan and sort of our Street Fighter guy, I'll let you pick at this one first.
Playing on Super NES. That was basically how I consumed a lot of my Street Fighter. I know that
Everybody's, yeah, but
everybody, I know that a lot of people were like arcade babies and like went all out to put their quarter in. Like that was never me. I was never much of an arcade guy, so I would always get into Street Fighter through consoles, and it was playing through for the first time and trying to beat Bison was like one of like gaming's best bosses like back in the day. Like
you hated him. He was
so cheap. And then when he got Turbo and you got the chance to actually play as Bison, you're like, oh, I can actually dish it out. And then suddenly the computer players were always finding counters, and it's like, wait a minute, why isn't Bison this easy to beat in the first game?
Yeah, this is not right.
It's that arcade design. Bison was made to make you spend quarters. So
it's funny how like that's continued. Like nowadays, or at least in Street Fighter 4, I think, like his Psycho Crusher was just like, oh, it fills the screen now because we needed to find a way.
Oh yeah, Street Fighter Alpha just like ramped everything up even bigger.
It just as cheap as it always was.
Yep.
We need to continue that tradition. So Brian, favorite Street Fighter memories?
Man, like it was such a huge thing back when I was younger.
Street Fighter 2 was we didn't really go much into the retrospective, but Street Fighter 2 was was the thing in the mid 90s.
Yeah, and that's kind of where it starts with me, because I was like at the right age. Or I was pretty young still. I think I was like 5 or 6 years old when it really came out and started in the arcades, and then probably closer to like 6 or 7 when I actually really fully understood it. And I think, I don't know if I told the story about getting yelled at by a manager at Little Caesars while playing Street Fighter. Because I've told that story in like others. Okay, so when I was younger,
I have to hear this now.
So when I was younger, the Little Caesars near me. This is before they like transitioned to a hot and ready economy. So it was an actual restaurant. You go there and you could like sit down with your family and the whole thing. They had a little arcade, and they of course had Street Fighter, and I was obsessed with Street Fighter. I loved Street Fighter, so I would go in there and I would play as Chun-Li. She was probably my favorite, and even though I didn't necessarily main her over all the years, like she's still probably my favorite Street Fighter character overall. But when you're a kid, you assume that when you hit the buttons, you've got to hit them hard, right? Because if you don't hit them hard, then you can't win. And of course, this was how Street Fighter 1 worked back in the day, but I didn't know that. So I'm just sitting there wailing on the buttons and trying to fight, and the manager comes in, yells, and like I don't know if he's like trying to like do a power trip on the 6-year-old or what, but he's like, "Hey, knock it off! Or I'm gonna have to make you kick you out of here." And I'm like, "Okay," and I like looked at him kind of like sullen and just started like tapping just gently. Like, if I was rude enough to flip people off, I probably would have.
Yeah.
But then, like, it was also really cool because it was a thing that was a big thing on the playground, and I had what I thought was awesome. I had female friends who were really into Street Fighter, right? And so it was cool because you could like play the different characters and you draw them and stuff like that. But just a lot of that kind of stuff. I remember when the movie came out. I didn't actually see it in theaters. I watched it later and just like what a piece of garbage that was.
They were all truly better than to go out on that.
He did.
Yeah,
he was the best part of that movie, though. Let's be fair. Like he brought his A game to a pretty thankless job.
Oh yeah.
But he
was not just signing a paycheck for that dumb movie.
But, like, watching the cartoons, I had like a couple of the G.I. Joes, which were terrible. That looked nothing like the characters.
Yeah, those were terrible.
I still have my Chun-Li in my office.
I think I had a Guile somewhere.
Yeah, like her neck came loose, like her head came loose, so my dad fixed her for me, which I thought was nice of him. Just stuff like that. And then my other favorite memory is that my nieces, and this is kind of the thing that you notice a lot when you have kids, or I'm sure you might be able to speak to this probably better than I could. But my nieces like love anything that's got like a really strong female hero in it, right? Especially because they are biracial, they're half Asian, half white. They love anybody who kind of looks like them, right? Like an Asian heroine or biracial heroine or something like that. I bring this up to say that they loved Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li. A movie somehow worse than the original Street Fighter movie.
Oh man!
And I saw this, I watched this, and my girlfriend at the time, wife now, we hated it. And I'm just like, this is not Chun-Li. This is not how this is supposed to be. But then later on, they would come up to me and say, Uncle Brian, did you see Street Fighter: Legend of Chun-Li yet? It's so cool. We love it. We have it. And I'm just like, you're right. It is a wonderful movie, dearie. It's just so. I'm so glad you like it.
They're gonna look at that movie in 15 years the way we look at movies that we watched in the 80s. We're like, that was a piece of crap.
It just frustrates me so much because she's such a good character, and they could have made a great movie, and they didn't.
Yeah.
And that was probably the last thing we saw Kristen Kruk in, wasn't it? Like, I don't think I've seen her in any shit.
She's disappeared off the face of the earth.
I'm pulling up IMDb as we speak.
Yeah, pretty much it. So speaking of Chun-Li, that's sort of tied to my memory. The memory that I want to share of Street Fighter is Street Fighter 2. I was not good at Street Fighter, like, ever in my life. So I would lose a lot to my brother and to the computer and to everyone. But with the home version, when they released the Super NES version, you can like play it as many times as you want. You have infinite continues, whatever. So I remember, I distinctly remember whoever I was trying to finish the story as, I would get to Vega and I would lose, and it got to the point that I would just lose on purpose because I was like, I'm gonna lose to Vega, like every fucking time. I'm just gonna lose to Vega. So whatever. So I would just like lose to him and then pick Chun-Li, who I could beat him with, and then I'd move on to Sagat and go back to the person that I was trying to finish the story with. because Vega was just like impossible for me to beat with anyone but Chun-Li. That's my my main memory of Street Fighter 2. Eventually, I got good enough that I could beat him with, Ryu and Ken. But like, if I was trying to finish it as like E Honda or Zangief or something, it was just like nope, like that is not happening. Yeah, that's my main memory. I also remember just the bajillion versions of Street Fighter 2 coming out, and for some reason that not seeming weird to me as a child.
Well, that was how it was done back then, and people are like still making jokes about it now, which I think tells you just how much that.
Like, ooh, 4 new characters. That seems worthwhile.
Yeah. Kristen Crook update. She actually is on a show right now called Beauty and the Beast on the CW. So she's been doing fine for herself. It sounds like, but that show did get canceled, so it'll be over this year. So who knows where things will take her? Maybe she'll take another shot at Chun-Li.
Well, DC Comics has taken over the CW at this point anyway, so.
Which I'm fine with.
I also remember the Street Fighter anime, like the Street Fighter Alpha anime did the whole Dark Ryu route, which I kind of hate about that series. But
there's a lot of that in 5, so.
You mean you don't like that they made Ryu interesting?
Yeah, there's a lot of that in 5. Yeah, I love it.
I don't know if they made him interesting. Like, I'm not denying that he's a boring character, but I don't think that helps.
Evil Ryu is amazing.
Anyway, point is, the old Street Fighter anime was really good. That was a really good, at least my memory of it, is that it was like actually a really good movie. I could watch it today and be like, oh my god, this is nuts.
It was on Netflix in its early days. I don't know if it's still there, but I'll find it somewhere. I gotta watch that
Alpha
again.
Anime was much more kinetic in its animation style. Like it had a sense of motion to it that the old anime didn't. But my memory of the story of the old anime was that it was pretty good.
I think I remember watching it. It was a long time ago, and I remember thinking it was all right. Especially considering how just dismal a lot of video game movies were and still are. To have one that's at least in the ballpark of being good, I think was just like, whoa, the game has changed.
And the timing was right to juxtapose it against the live-action version.
Right. And of course, they're I was reading about this the other day. There are like 6 different versions of that movie, depending on country of origin and in time it was released. There's like the original Japanese one, which is fully unedited and had like a different soundtrack. The American one had edits, and it had like this kind of like industrial metal rock rap soundtrack. Like,
yeah. And I kind of remember that.
And then there's like a European version that's like a combination
I remember
of both.
the rock soundtrack being out of place during the Vega Chun-Li fight scene, which is like a really disturbing scene. Just to put that out there.
Yeah.
But like then this rock kicks in and it's like what?
So
like,
there's
makes it weird.
There's a 1995 home video version that was released, and again, like different regions have different versions. They did a 2006 DVD version that was supposed to be uncut and unedited, but it's still not the full movie. Netflix put it out, like Ozzy said. Then they put a Blu-ray of it in the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection in 2012. That one was presented in standard definition, did not have the shower scene.
And
that
what's
is
the
so
point of the
infamous.
Blu-ray if it's in standard definition?
I don't know. And then they did a French version in 2013, and supposedly there is a team working on a new version of it that's supposed to come out this year, I think. And they're trying to like make the definitive version by taking all the different versions and splicing them together and trying to find the original footage. So they're doing doing yeoman's work. God bless them.
Yeah. Good on you guys.
Thank you for trying to make sense of this mess of a thing.
We're running out of time, so we need to get to newsy bits in our game. But Brian, I think you have to get our sponsors first.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Our sponsor, as always, Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook trial. Check out over 150,000 books with your 30-day free trial. If you want to get that, just go to audibletrial.com/chattycast. Again, that's audibletrial.com/chattycast. Get your free download, free trial.
All right, so newsy bits. I'm just going to cover one of these because one is really the most interesting of them. The Fallout 4 Season Pass is increasing in cost starting on March 1st, which is kind of a weird move. I will give them credit in that they are warning people that it's coming. They're saying, like, hey, you've got 2 weeks left to buy it at this price, after which it will go up to this price. So it's not like they're like blindsiding people. But that's sort of a weird move, right? Like, let's talk about this. Fallout 4 obviously was a huge hit. They say that the plans for their expansions have grown, and so that's why they're, asking for more money.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Brian, I know that this struck you as especially weird, so I'll go to you first. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, they are planning. Like my issue with this is that I think they are intending the goodwill toward them and the Fallout brand will be enough to smooth this over. Because and they're probably right. If you look at how people are very willing to just go along with the bugs and glitches in Fallout and just say it's part of the fun. I think they'll get away with it. But a guy who listened to the show last week, I don't know if he's listening this week, but Joe Foreman, if you're listening, hey Joe, he talks about like games. He's a games writer, I think, and he suggested that why didn't they just do a second $30 pass and just do like a season 2? Like you'd get more money and it would actually play better to the fans.
Yeah, that actually.
Like instead of saying, "Oh, by the way, we overestimated what we're doing, and it's going to be more expensive to get after." I mean, kudos to them again, like for letting people know.
There's a chart somewhere that says okay, this percentage of players buys season 1, this percentage buys season 2, and the drop off was just too steep.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason I can think of why they wouldn't do that.
Right.
Otherwise, it is very weird.
It's incredibly weird.
And what's strange to me is if the season pass doesn't really like work out. Let's say like the season pass offerings are disappointing for one reason or another, or like it gets panned by the fans or whatever. You could see it going on sale at some point. So you could eventually see like another discount. So it's like okay, this is kind of a temporary price increase.
30 up to 50, down to 30, down to 20, down to included in the Game of the Year edition.
Look at how often you see the Arkham Knight season pass on sale, or the Evolve season passes. Like those go on sale all the time. Like there's
a Game of the Year edition coming for this, right? Like of course there is.
Oh,
there's got to
be.
And
we've seen one for every other Fallout game, so why wouldn't we see one for this one?
And every Elder Scrolls game, every game.
That's the big thing is they sold a bunch of copies of the Game of the Year edition. Like this if nothing else, is amazing advanced marketing for that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's gonna be great to have later. That's for sure.
Let's move on to our game today, which should be pretty short. Our Beat the Dot game. It's called Subtitles. A lot of Street Fighter games have subtitles that tend to go unmentioned when we talk about them. So I'm going to mention a subtitle, and you match it to the game. Since some of these are for particular editions of games, like we talked about, there are only 5 Street Fighter games, guys. But within that, there are a lot of variations. Since these are for particular editions, you have to match it to the exact game.
Are we counting versus and cross games too, or just main series?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay, great.
Oh, so there's probably right there.
To make it a little harder, I'm not going to answer that question. All right.
Okay.
So first for you, Ozzy, the new challengers.
That's Super Street Fighter 2.
That is Super Street Fighter 2.
Okay. I thought you meant like dialogue subtitles.
No. Subtitles isn't subtitles.
All right.
Brian, this one's for you. These first 2 are like a little on the easier side. Actually, maybe all of these are easy. I have no idea. Number 2, the World Warrior.
That is, of course, Street Fighter 2.
Street Fighter 2 OG, vanilla flavor. Ozzy, Warrior's Dreams.
Warrior's Dreams.
Warrior's Dreams.
Is that a Street Fighter Alpha?
That is apparently, yes. You got that right. That's Street Fighter Alpha.
Yeah, I couldn't remember which one it was.
Brian,
yeah.
Grandmaster Challenge.
Grandmaster Challenge.
Yeah, you never hear these things.
Grandmaster Challenge. I'm going to say it sounds like a versus game. I'm going to go Capcom versus SNK.
It is not Capcom versus SNK. I'm sorry. That is Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Oh.
Whoa.
Yeah, the subtitle Challenge. Nobody has ever used. Yeah.
So Ozzy, this would be a tiebreaker, but since it's not a tiebreaker, I'll just give Ozzy a chance, and then I'll go back to Brian if he doesn't get it. Fight for the Future.
Fight for the Future. This is.
That is the X-Files.
This is gonna be one of those weird ones. This is like a Street Fighter. This is like Street Fighter EX or something like that.
No. This is. Oh wait, I should give Brian a chance. Brian, Fight for the Future.
Oh God. I'm gonna go ahead and say Marvel versus Capcom.
Nope. Sorry. I was sort of being tricky by not answering that question because none of them are actually those kinds of spin-off games. But I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to narrow it down. That was Street Fighter 3 Third Strike.
Oh,
Fight
Third
for the
Strike.
future.
Again, nobody has ever used that.
No one mentions any of these things. Like Grandmaster Challenge, who calls it?
Because technically, Third Strike is the last one on the timeline.
See,
like,
that's
yes.
what
we're hitting a Zelda-like timeline with Street Fighter at this point.
Weirdly, there were other subtitles for the other versions of Street Fighter 3. I think one was I don't know. They were very weird. One was like Giant Edition. I think Street Fighter 3 Second, whether the second one was. Second Impact was Giant Edition or something like that. Like, no one ever says these. So yeah, when you have that many Street Fighter games, I guess you have to start doling out subtitles.
Yeah. Though I do want to ask the question. Like, I haven't finished all of the story stuff for Street Fighter V. Is it really? Because I thought there was like ambiguity as to whether or not this or 3 was the last game in the timeline. Because 3 has been the definitive, most recent, but.
The consensus seems to be that it goes 4 to 5 to 3.
Huh.
This is supposed to lead into 3,
because they definitely refer to like Sean and stuff like that in this game. So
but Bison is dead in 3, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That would explain it. And he's super old in this game, so okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, he's just gonna. There's not going to be a confrontation. He's just going to keel over.
Which this would be a good time to plug. If you're listening to this live, in about an hour, we're breaking down some of the story mode beats that they're hinting towards because they're doing the big story mode in June. Mm-hmm. So they've left some clues as to what that's going to have. So I'm breaking some of those down at the
if you're
top
a canon
of the hour
nerd,
at noon today.
I am a canon nerd. I'm excited.
So
I'm a huge canon nerd. So
and I can't believe we went this entire podcast. It's too late now. I'll have to save it for another show. We'll
do a second week of Street Fighter
without talking about Skullomania once. Not one mention.
That's next week's topic.
The best Street Fighter character.
Skullomania, done. Skullomania and Dan. That's it. Next week.
Yeah, the Skullomania Dan Radio Power Hour.
No, I know because Steve was amazed that when I was talking to him in Slack last week about Street Fighter, and I made some mention that Akuma's not in this because apparently his Tekken 7 appearance is canon. So he's actually out trying to go kill Heihachi right now.
You see,
so that's why he's on Street Fighter 5. And Steve's like, wait, that's a thing? I go, I think it is.
so they share universe. It's a shared universe now.
Yeah.
Like anything that happens in Tekken, like if the world blows up in Tekken, it's like, well, they got to deal with that in Street Fighter. Like that makes for some weird situations. So you just plugged something, Ozzy. I'll give you a chance before we sign off to plug anything else you want to.
I'll pass for now.
You've been writing a lot about Street Fighter this week.
It's been all Street Fighter all the time this week, and I'm perfectly happy with that. So.
Yeah, you broke down not just the story beats, but your sort of educated guesses for character reveals.
They're educated guesses, but I think they're pretty obvious since you kind of see most of them there, and it's like, yeah.
So we'll call them very educated.
And the cool thing is, like, story mode in this game takes like 20 seconds to finish, so you'll be it's really easy to get caught up. So you have to worry about spoilers.
Yeah. Brian, have you written any?
No, but I'll plug something else though, if that's okay.
Yeah, you can plug whatever.
If we're talking like Street Fighter and lore nerds and all that, the Street Fighter art books they put out, SF20, SF25, that sort of thing. Really great sources for art, of course, but also gives you a lot of insight into how certain characters are designed, the ideas they're going for, that kind of thing. It's kind of a nice little behind-the-scenes look. I know Udon Entertainment puts them out and translates them. I can't, like, if you go on Amazon, you can probably find them pretty easy. They're going to run a little bit more expensive, like $40 or so, but if you're a Street Fighter fan, it's worth checking out if you like the characters and the story and all that. So definitely recommend those. They're a really fascinating kind of look at these things, and it really also gives you a feel for just how many times they try to do cheesecake drawings of the ladies in the game. You're just like, oh, there's another one of those.
Street Fighter. Yeah. I don't want to mention what it was for in case you don't want to yet, but you were doing research. You get to look at those kinds of art books to do research.
Yeah, I think it's still a little early on, but there's a good chance, if all goes well, and I have no reason to think it won't, that in the next year or so, I will have a thing on Chun-Li that is going to be part of a larger project. So
yes. So I mentioned my Fire Emblem review. It's up on the site now. My Fire Emblem guides went up at the same time. We have a bunch of different ones covering what are the differences, how to do different things. I also have another review incoming very soon. I didn't talk about it because I don't think I'm allowed to talk about the game itself, but I can say I'm reviewing it. Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare 2. The review is coming up tonight at midnight Pacific time because that's when the early access starts. So as soon as people are able to play it, they can also read about it.
Yeah, we're gonna have a couple of games to talk about next week between that and Far Cry, and I believe The Walking Dead Michonne is next week as well. So we got a couple of good ones coming.
We got the nice March little mini flood going on right now, leading into the March financials when people start actually releasing games again. So that's what's going on the site, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it for Ozzy Mejia. I'm Steve Watts.
I am Brian Carr.
And we'll see you on Chatty.
Really? That one? That's what you got on?
Worth it.